It was well past midnight in Buckingham Palace, and the corridors lay silent, the kind of silence that seemed to hold its breath. In the depths of the East Wing, down a narrow hallway known only to senior staff, a door stood hidden behind an ornate tapestry. Behind it was the Crown Vault, a room few had ever entered, and even fewer truly understood. Rows of glass cases glimmered faintly under security lights. Emerald tiaras worn by Queen Victoria, diamond brooches passed down since the Tudor era, gold goblets engraved with monarchs' seals. The air itself seemed heavy with history. On the polished oak desk at the far end, an open ledger sat waiting for the night's routine inspection, except something was wrong. William Harcourt, the palace's senior inventory officer, ran his finger down the page, his brow furrowed. Then again, and again, a cold feeling settled in his stomach. The ledger was precise, updated after every official event, yet the figures no longer matched reality. One sapphire and pearl necklace from the Georgian collection? Missing. An engraved silver serving set from the reign of George III? Gone. A small diamond coronet once worn by Queen Mary? Nowhere to be found. And each item had last been recorded as loaned for personal use by Queen Camilla. William glanced toward the CCTV monitor in the corner. For this section of the vault, there was no recording security tradition dictated privacy when the most senior royals borrowed from the collection. He closed the ledger and swallowed hard. The next morning, whispers began among the staff. It started with a conversation between two footmen polishing silver in the service corridor. "You hear about the vault?" one asked, lowering his voice. "Only bits," the other replied. "Something's missing, they say. Not just something. Many somethings, and all roads lead to—" The footman trailed off and glanced over his shoulder before mouthing the name, Camilla. It didn't take long for the gossip to reach the Royal Council, an inner circle of senior advisors tasked with protecting both the monarchy's image and its assets. They met in private, away from the public eye, their expressions grim. Sir Andrew Pembroke, the council's head, set the tone. "We're not speaking of misplaced trinkets. These are heirlooms of the crown. If this is an inside matter," he paused, looking around the room, "we'll need to act quietly. Discretion is our only shield." In the middle of this tension was Catherine, Princess of Wales. She'd been raised in the palace's modern era, but trained under the late Queen Elizabeth's watchful eye in the art of quiet power. Catherine's approach to crises was methodical. No sudden moves, no unnecessary drama. She'd seen firsthand how Elizabeth handled problems, resolved them in the shadows before they reached the front pages. Sir Andrew requested her assistance. The council knew she possessed both the trust of the family and the intellect to connect subtle dots others missed. That evening, Catherine walked into the vault for the first time in weeks. She ran her eyes over the display cases, lingering where gaps had been discreetly filled with velvet padding. She opened the ledger, scanning the signatures. Camilla's name appeared more than once sometimes, followed by the vague notation state dinner, private gala, or simply personal use. "The problem isn't the borrowing," Catherine said quietly to William Harcourt, who stood beside her. "It's that these items didn't come back." Camilla's journey to the throne had been anything but smooth. Once vilified in the press, she'd fought for years to gain public acceptance. Through charity work, diplomatic appearances, and a carefully managed public image, she had become queen consort alongside Charles. But to some insiders, old habits die hard. Her social circles had long included antique dealers, private collectors, and aristocrats who thrived in the shadows of high-end auctions. These connections, once harmless, now cast a long shadow over the missing jewels. Catherine, aware of these ties, began quietly mapping Camilla's recent public appearances and private travels against the dates of the missing items. Patterns emerged. Pieces vanished shortly after specific events: a Paris charity gala, a weekend at Highgrove, a diplomatic reception in Vienna. A palace IT specialist, working under Catherine's direction, began scanning online marketplaces for matches to the missing descriptions. It took weeks, but then it happened a silver serving tray engraved with George III's cipher appeared on a niche European auction site. The seller? An account registered in the name of a distant cousin of Camilla's, residing in Wiltshire. Catherine brought the evidence to Sir Andrew. "This doesn't prove her involvement," Sir Andrew cautioned, "but it confirms the items are out there. We'll have to proceed with utmost care." Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere shifted. Camilla noticed the subtle changes, servants suddenly avoiding eye contact, conversations cutting off when she entered the room. Her invitations to certain council briefings quietly rescinded. One evening, at a formal dinner, Catherine and Camilla found themselves seated across from each other. The air between them was cool but polite. "You seem distracted," Camilla remarked with a small smile. "Just thinking about the value of history," Catherine replied, her eyes steady. Staff began to share quiet stories. Camilla had always shown a fascination for the vault, often requesting private tours before events. She would linger over certain pieces, touching them longer than necessary, asking questions about their histories. One aide recalled her holding a diamond necklace once belonging to Queen Alexandra, whispering it would be wasted in storage. Determined to understand the full scope, Catherine began working late into the night. She reviewed photographs from past galas, noting which pieces Camilla had worn. She cross-referenced them with the vault's current inventory. The gaps were undeniable. Her notes filled an entire binder: dates, locations, items, possible sales channels. Yet still, no direct evidence tied Camilla to the transactions. The Royal Council decided it was time to speak directly with Camilla, but in private. They invited her to a closed meeting in one of the palace's smaller drawing rooms, far from the public eye. Catherine attended not as an accuser, but as a silent observer, her role to measure reactions and note inconsistencies. Sir Andrew began gently. "Your Majesty, we've noticed some irregularities in the Crown's inventory. We're certain there's an explanation, but we must ask, have you any knowledge of these missing pieces?" Camilla's eyes flickered just for a moment. "Irregularities? I've borrowed items, yes, for events, as is tradition. Are you suggesting otherwise?" Her voice was calm, but her fingers tapped the armrest of her chair. The meeting ended without resolution. But to Catherine, the tension in Camilla's tone told its own story. The real breakthrough came 2 weeks later. A pair of emerald earrings, last seen on Camilla at a state banquet, appeared in the catalog of a private Paris auction. The auction house required anonymity for its sellers, but Catherine's team traced the consignment to a holding company tied to one of Camilla's longtime acquaintances. The web was tightening. One rainy evening, Catherine sat alone in her study, reviewing the latest findings. The list of missing items had grown. The connections to Camilla's circle were now undeniable, even if indirect. She closed the binder and looked out at the dark London skyline. Her phone buzzed a message from the IT specialist. "We found something. Not just sales. Emails. You need to see this. Tonight." Catherine's heart pounded as she rose from her desk. The final piece of the puzzle might be waiting. Catherine arrived at the palace's secure IT room just after 10 p.m., rain still dripping from her coat. The atmosphere was tense. Only a few trusted staff were present. James Harlow, the palace's digital forensics specialist, gestured her over to his desk. "I didn't want to put this in writing," he said in a low voice. "You need to see it yourself." On the screen, an email chain was open, coded but deciphered by James. The sender's address was masked through multiple rerouting channels, but the recipient's name was shockingly clear: a private account linked to one of Camilla's closest aides. The subject line read simply, "Consignment, Vienna, Geneva, Paris." Attached was a spreadsheet listing descriptions, estimated values, and discreet notes about the condition of each item. Catherine's breath caught. Half the entries matched missing pieces from the Crown Vault. Her eyes froze on one line. pearl and diamond coronet worn by Queen Mary to be sold via private collector in Geneva. Buyer confirmed. This isn't a misunderstanding, James said quietly. This is coordination. Next morning, the royal council gathered in a closed session. The ornate drawing room felt smaller than usual, the air heavy with what Catherine now carried. Sir Andrew Pembroke opened the meeting. We have troubling new evidence, Lady Catherine. Would you? Catherine stood, her tone calm but measured. She explained the findings: emails, consignment lists, auction records, each piece of information connecting Camilla's inner circle to the disappearance of royal heirlooms. Some council members shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances that said more than words. Finally, Lord Pembroke sighed. If true, this goes beyond breach of trust. It's a violation of the monarchy's very covenant with the people. That afternoon, Catherine requested a private audience with Camilla. She chose a small sitting room, away from the grand public spaces, where the walls didn't carry whispers. Camilla entered with a guarded expression. You've been busy, she said, settling into a chair. Catherine met her gaze evenly. Busy protecting the legacy we all serve. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock. You think I've taken them? Camilla said finally. It wasn't a question. I think the evidence points to people close to you, Catherine replied. And I think you've allowed them access they should never have had. Camilla's jaw tightened. You have no idea the pressures I face. The scrutiny, the debts left behind by certain family obligations. And none of that excuses selling the history of the crown, Catherine said softly but firmly. Later that evening, King Charles was briefed by the council. The weight of the revelations was visible in his slumped shoulders. She is my wife, he said quietly. I have stood by her through decades of storms. But this, he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Sir Andrew spoke gently but firmly. Your Majesty, the Crown cannot afford the perception of corruption. We recommend restrictions. It was a bitter pill limiting Camilla's access to the Crown Vault, withdrawing her from certain state functions and placing her appearances under closer supervision. Charles nodded slowly, the decision cutting into him like glass. Officially, nothing was announced. Public events continued, smiles were worn, hands were shaken. But within palace walls, the shift was palpable. Camilla's once commanding presence at council gatherings was reduced to a ceremonial nod. Her schedule, once filled with high-profile galas, was quietly pruned. Rumors still circulated in the servants' corridors, faint echoes of missing tiaras and auction houses, but nothing reached the tabloids. Not yet. Despite the council's decision, Catherine wasn't finished. She still needed clarity. Was Camilla directly involved, or merely complicit by silence? Working with James Harlow, she traced the private aid's bank transactions. They revealed a startling pattern: large deposits after each confirmed sale, routed through offshore accounts, then quietly transferred to a trust associated with Camilla's extended family. Catherine didn't present this to the council immediately. Instead, she visited Charles in his private study. You deserve to know all of it, she said, laying the file on his desk. Charles read in silence. When he looked up, his eyes were glassy. She'll never admit to it, he said. Not to me, not to anyone. And yet, I can't protect her from this. 2 nights later, Charles and Camilla met in the private apartments. No aides, no advisors, just the two of them. They have evidence, Charles began, his voice heavy. Camilla looked away. You believe them, she said flatly. I believe what I see, and I see a chain of choices that cannot be ignored. For the first time, Camilla's composure cracked. Do you have any idea what it's like to be measured against ghosts? To live in the shadow of a woman the world still worships? I wanted something of my own, a legacy that wasn't just borrowed. Charles shook his head. A legacy isn't built by taking from those who come after us. The next week, the council implemented its restrictions. Camilla's access to the vault was revoked. All future loans of royal jewelry required unanimous council approval. Her public role shifted to smaller charitable engagements, far from the glitter of state banquets. In official photographs, the changes were subtle. A brooch here, a strand of pearls there, but gone were the historic tiaras and priceless coronets. Throughout it all, Catherine maintained her composure. She never publicly alluded to the scandal, but her private influence ensured new safeguards were embedded into the monarchy's operations. Digital asset tracking for every piece in the vault, regular independent audits, family oversight committees for high-value loans, Sir Andrew would later say privately. Without the Princess of Wales, this would have rotted from within. Months later, a small velvet box arrived at Buckingham Palace by unmarked courier. Inside was the pearl and diamond coronet last worn by Queen Mary, the same piece listed in that damning email. No note accompanied it, but Catherine knew. She placed it back in its glass case in the vault, her reflection faint in the polished surface. "History belongs here," she whispered to no one. The scandal never reached the front pages, but those within the palace knew the truth. Trust had been fractured. Charles, though still by Camilla's side in public, spent more time in quiet reflection. Camilla appeared at events, but her presence was subdued. Her once sparkling confidence dulled. Catherine, meanwhile, emerged as a guardian of the crown's integrity, a role she carried with quiet dignity. In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, history is more than dates and portraits. It is gold and silver, pearl and diamond, symbols of a monarchy's promise to its people. When that promise is threatened, the defenders of the crown must act, not with noise, but with precision. For in the end, it is not the scandal we remember, but the resolve to protect what endures. Fade out on an image of the vault door closing, the heavy lock clicking into place.